Please take your seat and turn off your phone or put it into silent mode. We will begin the talk shortly. Allow the next few moments for you to put your mind into a state of tranquility and mindfulness to absorb the talk that will be given by Ajahn Brahm.
Nice to see you. How have you been? How have you been? Excellent. Yeah, I just come out of a nice meditation.
Nothing changed that much.
No.
Although after so many
Yeah,
years.
you look the same too. Excellent. Thank you for coming. Hi.
How long was your talk?
It's supposed to be maybe an hour and then questions and answers.
So,
But
how long for questions? Just to give it.
it's supposed to be about 2 hours, the whole lot.
So we finish.
Yes, good. Thank you.
We shall begin within about 5 minutes. Say 分钟. One 3:25. Let's just start. 3:25.
Okay.
Okay. start at 3:30 then. Okay, I'll tell Ajahn Brahm.
We need to wait until 3:30 to begin because some VIP are still coming in. Because once it's come in.
That's the one that we're waiting for. I think we'll just wait till 3:30.
Yeah. All right.
I know, it's just still wait or? Before we begin, just to let you know the format for today's talk, after I do a short introduction, Ajahn Brahm will take over and give you a wonderful talk, followed by a Q&A session. And we will end the talk at 5:30 sharp. Because I am the time master and I'm very good at keeping time. And also Ajahn Brahm probably needs time to recover from his red-eye journey from Perth. Hope you understand and accept the regulations. All right, I shall now begin. Welcome, Ajahn Brahm, venerables, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am John Cannon, the president of the Center of Buddhist Studies Alumni Association, the co-organizer with the Bodhinyana Foundation for this year's Hong Kong tour given by Ajahn Brahm. And we are very fortunate because we were very lucky. We had him almost the same time last year, I believe. So we have seen him 2 years in a row. So maybe this is the beginning of a continual process, unless, of course, impermanency interrupts. All right. Before handing over to Ajahn Brahm, I will give a short introduction to Ajahn Brahm, which of course most of you already know, but I still need to go through it. And if some of you are seeing Ajahn Brahm for the first time, this will be new. He was born in London in 1951. He graduated from the University of Cambridge, first-class honors in theoretical physics, not Buddhism. So he's had a wonderful trajectory in life to go from physics to Buddhism. He is the abbot of Bodhinyana Monastery in Perth, Australia. His teacher was Ajahn Chah in Thailand. Therefore, Ajahn Brahm follows the Theravada tradition, and not Theravada tradition. He is in very high demand overseas and everywhere for the wonderful talks he gives, in person or on YouTube. He has written numerous books, such as Opening the Technical. Opening the door of your heart, mindfulness, bliss, and beyond, the art of disappearing, good, bad, who knows, kindfulness and bare awareness. All right, of which most of you have probably already have a copy, and which you will give him to sign at the end for his autograph. Today's talk is when the going gets tough, the wise get kindful. Now be careful here, it says kindful, but I'm sure he will not neglect mindful as being part of the process, because without being mindful, how can you be kindful? And with that, I will now hand over the proceedings to Ajahn Brahm.
Thank you. Excellent. So first of all, how is the sound quality? Still good. Can you hear okay? Please, that there was something which I always remember as a kid. You were quite rebellious, but also at Cambridge University, we were taught such things as where everybody thinks the same, no one thinks at all. Which is, in those days, I thought that was a good reason to be a little bit rebellious. In other words, seeing things in different ways sometimes. I still recall that the first time I attended Cambridge University, they had something they called a Societies Fair. The Societies Fair, welcome, thank you for coming. Societies Fair was when we had all the different clubs and societies at Cambridge at the time. Hi, nice to see you again. All the clubs and societies which were available, they were all just in the same big hall where you could go and join up whichever club or society you wished to. There was one society I saw there, which was the Hare and Hounds Society, fox hunting. And I thought, no, I don't want to join that. I was already a Buddhist when I was only 16, but I never knew how to take that path further. And one of the things which happened there, when I went to this Societies Fair, one of the clubs I saw was at Cambridge at the time. This was in 1969. It was the Buddhist Society of Cambridge University. And for me, that was, there's a Buddhist society here? I never expected that. I was a bit stupid. Instead of actually going looking in a telephone book under B for Buddhist, I didn't know what to do. I was the only person in my family who was associated with Buddhism. I knew no one else who was a Buddhist. So I went to that stall, and then I asked, I want to join. But I think many of you know in Buddhism, we don't compel anybody. We don't want to force anybody. The young man sitting behind the desk said to me, you don't have to join. Just come and see. That was always, a nice thing to say. You don't need to commit. Test it out first of all. See if you like it. And I said, no, I want to join. I'm already a Buddhist. He said, no, you don't have to join. Take your time. Come to a couple of talks first of all and see if you like it. And I said, how much is it? And he said, it's £1 to join. That was a lot of money in those days, especially for a poor student. But I got my wallet out and I gave him a £1 note, join me. And that fellow became a very good friend of mine for life. And he was also into theoretical physics and Buddhism and astrophysics. And also the interesting thing about this fellow, he was also into ghost hunting. Now you may laugh, but all those things go together. We want to find out what the nature of the world really is, not just through belief or through fear, but finding out. If you want to find out about what are ghosts, for example, what do they do during the day? They only seem to come out at night. Do they sleep during the day? Where do they go? Now, if they're going to be a ghost for a long time, do like the male ghost find a nice female ghost and get married and have some kid ghosts? That's the sort of inquisitive mind I had at the time. So this young man who became a lifelong friend, the one thing I never realized about him was that he went into the theoretical physicist much deeper than I did. And eventually he became a very close associate, one of the close associates of Professor Stephen Hawkins. So I was actually quite surprised myself that when I saw, they told me, you must look at this. This was, I think, the life story, like a documentary of Stephen Hawkins. And one of the students he was with at the time, his close associates, was my friend. His name was Professor Bernard Carr. And because he was not actually in the movie, but he was represented in the movie, he also had to go on the red carpet on Leicester Square for the premiere, for the opening. And through his life, he was a close friend of Stephen Hawking's. He was also a Buddhist. He was also a very strong Buddhist. He was also, for many years, the president of the Psychic Research Society over in London, a professional ghost hunter. I was surprised that you giggled there, because to me this should be no misunderstanding. This is what a good scientist should do, to investigate. And I'm saying this because this is a university and there's quite a few staff, I hope, at this talk. Are you a really good university? Or do you really investigate things? Do you understand what is truth? And one of the ways you said earlier, we should be mindful. That's not enough. If you want to find out the truth, you have to be much more than just being aware. And I'll give you an example now. This was one of the stories told to me by Professor Bernard Carr. He spent his life as professor of theoretical physics at, I think, Queen Mary College in London University. He's still emeritus professor. But when he told me this story, I thought it was a wonderful story, which is pertinent to the practice of Buddhism. He was one of his friends, another physicist, claimed he discovered the secret of levitation, how to make things rise into the air. This is not a crazy person. This is someone who is teaching physics. Are there any lecturers or professors of physics here today? Not just of Buddhism. Okay, but anyway, he said he could demonstrate in laboratory conditions how to levitate things. And because, it was an amazing sort of claim, he had so many of his fellow professors and lecturers, no students, professional experimental physicists, not just theoretical physicists, to come and see this demonstration. It was performed in the Imperial College in London, one of the top science colleges in London. And not just like a lecture theatre like this, the old-fashioned science laboratories, you can see the bench in front and all the chairs like here going upwards. But he also had the best equipment he could borrow from the university. So they could have ultraviolet, infrared, all sorts of amazing machines. He said, if it works, I want to record it for posterity. And so the experimenter, it wasn't Bernard, it was one of his associates, came into the hall through the door which the professors enter, carrying a flower pot, like an ordinary flower pot like these. And he put the flower pot on the table, so no strings. And he said, we're now going to levitate this flower pot in front of you. Turn on all of the cameras and videos and whatever else you've got. And he said, to enable to do this, we need to create the right atmosphere. I want you all to start chanting, very simply, the Hindu holy word Om. It's also shared in Buddhism as well, whenever we chant Om Mani Padme Hum, if you're a Tibetan Buddhist or Vajrayana Buddhist. But anyway, they started chanting Om. I must admit that I know many of those professors who were so sort of conservative. I'd have loved to see them chanting Om, 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 Om. I would have burst out laughing. But said, no laughter, this is serious. They started chanting Om, and as they were chanting, that flower pot lifted above the table. It levitated. And they photographed it, videoed it, infrared, ultraviolet, you name it, to make sure that people knew this was actually levitating. And afterwards, when it went down again, that they asked everybody, these were professors, lecturers, everyone had a PhD there. You know what PhD means? Permanent head damage. Please excuse me, I do apologize. But when it lifted up and went down again, he asked, what do you think of that? What's your reaction? They'd just done a levitation experiment in front of everybody. And the interesting part of this story was a couple of those physicists said it never lifted above the table at all. It was photographed. Yeah, you can fake photographs. It was videoed. Yeah, you can fake videos as well. You just ask Mr. Trump. Please excuse me. But then it levitated. They said, what do you think of that? And they said, it never did. It stayed on the table all the time. And they were honest. That's what they perceived. They were mindful all the time. It stayed on the table. The other ones saw it rise. And then he said what had happened. What had happened was the reason why they had to ask everybody to start chanting Om, 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 because there was a simple electromagnet under the table, but it required a large amount of electricity. And whenever you turn on that sort of current, you can hear it start humming. So that was actually to hide the secret of the experiment. It was electromagnetism, quite simply, but actually to turn on the current, you had to hide it. And that's how he hid it. He said the important part of the experiment was not levitation, it was perception. Those two physicists who said it never happened, they said that because it can't happen. It's impossible. It can't occur. And even though they were experimental scientists, because it was something too challenging to their ideas of reality, it was blocked out of the perceptual apparatus in their brain. That's what it's trying to prove. And it proved it so beautifully. That's why just being mindful, if you want to know the truth, is not enough. That's why universities of all places should be courageous, challenging. You do an experiment like that, not to prove something, but to try and disprove things. To me, that was always the way of physics. You have a theory, and you try your hardest to disprove it. And if you can't, then you can say it's valid. Proving things, you always tend to bend the truth. That's one of the reasons why, one of the things I understood from science, which I incorporated into Buddhism, is you don't just deny things that can't happen. Have an open enough mind to see if it can happen or not. That's where you discover new things, new ways of getting through old problems which keep making things difficult for people. That's why when I made that title up, when things get difficult, what they usually say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That doesn't make any sense to me. That type of response just makes things worse. Instead, when the going gets tough, then the tough get kindful. We try another response. And what does that mean? Already, that word kindful became a rebellious new way of looking at the old term mindfulness. Can you be mindful? People believe they're mindful, but a lot of times they're only mindful of what they want to see. Anything which is too challenging, like flower pots lifting up when they shouldn't be able to do so. Anything like that, we tend to dismiss. this can't be true. What kindness does, it softens your mind and allows your mind to see things you've never seen before. Of course, in Buddhism, this is not just modern, what was that author's name, about the power of now? Tolle, yes. The present moment was so many years ago, centuries ago. It's even in one of the Buddha's suttas, powerful sutta about the power of the present moment. Can you be in the present moment? Can you let go? How you can let go? You know that you said, kind of semi-accurately, I'm the abbot of this monastery over in Australia. That's not all I do. My responsibilities are huge over there. I've got Bodhinyana Monastery, Dhammasara Nuns Monastery, Kusala Monastery, Albany Monastery, Newbury Buddhist Monastery, and that's just in Australia. Oh, and our city centre, Nolamara Centre. And also, actually, what is my role in BIF in Hong Kong? Spiritual advisor, that's much easier. You know what they call me over in Perth? Not the spiritual director of the Buddhist Society of Western Australia. They call me the spiritual dictator of the Buddhist Society of Western Australia. And there's also so many other organizations. Over in Singapore, the spiritual advisor of the, what's it called? Of Buddhist Fellowship and of Brahm Center. You know where they got that word from, Brahm Center. That's many little centers there which do teachings of meditation and good attitudes to people all over Singapore. And over in Malaysia as well, spiritual advisor of the Buddhist Gem Fellowship. And over in UK as well, we've got a big nuns monastery coming up there called Anukampa Bhikkhuni Project. It's been very successful so far. And so many other places. How on earth can I deal with such huge responsibility? And the answer is very easy. I'm kindful. And I know about how to let go of the past and the future. The reason why I couldn't remember those names is I try to forget them when I come over to Hong Kong. In other words, I'm only the abbot of Bodhinyana Monastery when I'm there. I never take that position with me when I go overseas. I'm a temporary abbot. And where I learned that from was from you. Every one of you, my friends, colleagues, people who visit, sometimes they come to Bodhinyana Monastery where I live. And they say, this is a beautiful monastery. It's so peaceful here. It's so tranquil and conducive to meditation. And I say, are you going nuts? This is my workplace. This is my office. This is where I teach. People will always come up to me, Ajahn Brahm, can I take a photograph? Can you sign my book? Can I ask a question about meditation? And I'm also, I have to look after the building. There's not enough water, or there's too much water. The roof is leaking. Can we do something about this? And there's some visitors. I've got an invitation to go to Hong Kong. Can you please answer it? That's my experience before at Bodhinyana Monastery, where I live, where I'm the boss. So and I also on the weekends. The weekends, if I'm not over here in another country, I have to go to our city centre on the weekend, where I teach. I'm also the spiritual director, so I've got veto power on all the committee decisions, so they always have to go through me first of all. And there's a lot of decisions to be made. I'm like the CEO, but not really the CEO. I'm the CEM, Chief Executive Monk. And that really is a lot. So I was doing like 3 or 4 jobs. I was supposed to be a monk, leaving the world, having a lovely, peaceful life. But I found I was doing so much work. So on Monday mornings, I made a vow When I go from our city centre on Sunday evening back to Bodhinyana on a Monday morning, I said, on that Monday morning, I am not the abbot. I'm not the boss. I'll be a visitor just like you. When I became a visitor, and I really did that, I pretended, but I made that pretense actually real. I could see the monastery in which I lived, just like each one of you. I had no responsibility, no ownership, and I could see its beauty. It is a peaceful monastery when you don't have to run it, you don't have to administer it. Somebody asked me a question on meditation. I said, I'm sorry, Ajahn Brahm's not here today. Well, when the monk said he was going crazy, I said, well, maybe you can see the head monk tomorrow. When any of you visited, is Ajahn Brahm here? I said, no, he's not here today. I wasn't lying. I was being truthful. I'm just an ordinary person today. I never owned my job. Then I could enjoy it without having this burden of responsibility, always thinking you should be doing things. It was like being kindful to myself. That's the way you handled huge amounts of responsibility without any stress. Where does that come from, not owning anything? It is being kindful, but it also comes from the Buddhist idea of non-self. How much do you own? Really, you don't own much at all. Your apartment, or your house, your car, wherever you live, is it really yours? If it really is, you get very upset if it disappears. Someone steals it. One of my friends, when we first came over to Australia, the only thing he had in his life was this really expensive, high-powered Harley-Davidson motorbike. He never had a house. He never had any career. All he did was get on his motorbike, and he would come to many different spiritual centers, including Buddhists, over in Australia. And when he had enough, he could get on his bike and go somewhere else. Quite a nice life of freedom, you may think. But then one day, when he was in Sydney, he went to the shopping center, parked his bike, went to do some shopping, get some stuff for his survival. And when he came back to the car park, his motorbike had gone. Someone had stolen it. And I knew this for truth. It was a good friend of his. That was the only valuable thing he owned in his life. And he was disappointed. So why does some people be so selfish? They steal things. They should work themselves, earn the money, and buy it themselves. But then he thought, no. He remembered the teachings which I told him. You don't really own anything. There's so many causes. I don't know if you've seen news of places like Australia. There's fires, there's floods. Many people lose their homes and possessions. He just lost the only thing he owned, a motorbike, a very expensive one. But then he decided, no, I'll look at this in a Buddhist way. He said, whoever's got that motorbike, may they enjoy it as much as I have over these years. I give it to them. May they enjoy it and be happy and well with it. I can always just use public transport or something. And then when he thought like that, he really let it go, even though it had been stolen. He felt so much joy that this Buddhism actually worked. He could let go of the only thing he cared about. And it's only then, after he'd let go, he'd realized he was in the wrong level of the car park. Have you ever done that? So he went to the next level of the car park and his motorbike was there. Wasn't stolen at all. And he had to write that story to me because it was important to him. He had a test and he passed it with flying colours, still had his motorbike as well. If you own things, it's a burden on you. It's tough, it's stress. If it really was stolen, well, it's gone. Won't get it back again. Why can't you let it go? Alternatively, you stress out about it. You make life tough instead of being kindful. Whoever gets it, may they enjoy it as much as I have. It's the same. It's the ownership is one of the reasons why we suffer so much. If you get sick and someone says, you've got a cancer, does that scare you? Do you think, I'm going to die soon? Honestly, what's wrong with dying? You're going to do it, sooner or later. I always say, let's get it over and done with. I like challenging and making people see things more differently. I said I was rebellious as a monk. There was one occasion when I decided, I like telling jokes. I decided to tell a joke at a funeral service. This was many years, about 30, 35 years ago. And as soon as I don't know if you've seen funeral ceremonies over in Australia, you give all the chanting and the ceremonies, and the funeral directors, in those days, always guys looking really miserable, wearing black, standing at the back. They were just almost more dead than the person in the coffin. And the funeral directors were looking at me. They couldn't speak because they would interrupt my little sermon. They'd go, no, saying that to me. They didn't want me to tell a funny story at a funeral. And if you try that with me, and I will really tell 2 funny stories, that's rebellious. No. So I told this joke. They just encouraged me. And this was a joke of the 2 people, husband and wife. One was quite sick, and eventually he died. And I've seen this many times in my life. He died, and a few weeks later, or actually a few days later, his wife died too. They were so close together, married together for so many years. And when one died, the other died pretty quickly afterwards. So they appeared in heaven together. Now, don't challenge me. Did the Buddha say this? It's like a metaphor, okay? So they appeared in heaven together, and this angel came up to them and said, because of all your goodness and kindness, both of you, I've come to show you your heavenly reward. This was a funeral ceremony, so I thought this was appropriate. And so this is your heavenly reward. And they took them to this mansion on the cliffs. It's not $1 million view. It's actually $1 million view in those days, about 30 years ago. It's about a $10 million property. Really expensive, a mansion. And straight away, the guy said, yeah, this looks very beautiful, but I don't think I can afford the property tax, which you have to pay the local government. You have things like property tax here in Hong Kong. The bigger the mansion, the more you have to pay. He said, I can't afford this. And then the angel told him a secret. Up in heaven, we don't have councils. It's for free. And they took them inside this heavenly mansion. It was huge. They saw so many chandeliers. They said, you see the chandeliers there? That's not Waterford crystal. That's diamonds. It's heaven. And they showed them this huge TV screen. Not like the tiny ones you see in people's house, only a couple of meters wide. It's about 100 meters wide. We know how you love soccer. So you can watch your favorite soccer team on this TV screen whenever you like. And because this is heaven, you'll find your team will always be losing until the last second. and then they'll score a couple of goals and win. This is heaven. Whoever you support would always win. And they took him into the toilet. And even the toilet bowl was made of solid gold. And the little button you press at the top there, that was also another diamond, 20 carats. And when you press that button, water never came out. Chanel number 5. And the whole house, the mansion was all like that. And so the guy said to the angel said to the guy, first of all, if there's anything you don't like, let us know. If you don't like Chanel number 5, some other perfume in your toilet bowl, just let me know and I'll change it straight away. This is heaven. And then they took him to the garage. In that garage, a triple garage. First of all, there was an SUV. It would go anywhere. You know those all-terrain vehicles? Said, this is so powerful. This can even go up waterfalls. Straight up. Saw this big limo. Have you ever been in a limo? They're terrible to park. You can't find parking anywhere. This was such a huge limo, it had a swimming pool in the back. And the last vehicle was a Bugatti sports car. Not an ordinary sports car. This was souped up Bugatti, can go as fast as you like. And he said, we always knew you love sports cars in this life, but what's the point of having a sports car in Hong Kong? With those windy roads going up and too many police around, you get fined. And he said, you can drive this sports car however fast you like. I said, but what about the police or safety? I said, look, you don't have to worry about safety. You're already dead. Drive as fast as you like, and no police up in heaven. And then open the garage doors. On the opposite side of the garage was this immaculate 18-hole golf course. We know how much you love playing golf. So we had this golf course constructed especially for you on the opposite side of your house. And it was made by Tiger Woods himself. How can that be? Tiger Woods isn't dead. Oh, yes, but you remember when he had that big argument with his first wife? He crashed his car. When he had out-of-body experience, that's when got him to design your golf course for you. And this golf course, it's a heavenly golf course. As long as you hit the green, whatever way the ball goes when it hits the green, it always curls into the hole. It's heaven. He looked at the golf club, the big place for the members. And he said, look, someone on my salary will never be able to afford that. And he said, look, you're already a member, not for life, for death. He was a death member. He's dead. So then the angel left. And as soon as the angel left, the husband was very upset and angry at his wife. Started scolding her, shouting at her. And then the husband said, or the wife said, why are you scolding me? Why are you so angry and unhappy? We've got this beautiful house. We've got this beautiful rooms. You can watch your football team at your leisure, and they will always win. You got the Bugatti sports car. You can go as fast as you like. And you got this golf course on the opposite side of the road when you remember forever. Why are you so upset at me? And that's when the husband said, wife, darling, if it wasn't for all the health food you gave me for the last couple of years, I could have been up here a long time ago. Do you eat health food? You're putting off your personal Bugatti car. Waiting. So that's a joke which I told at the funeral service. not only the family were very happy, I was also aware that there was something shaking inside that box. Why can't we have some celebrations and happiness when somebody passes away? It's a tough thing to have when you lose someone you're very close to. What a wonderful thing it is to make it light-hearted and to make it so joyful, to make it such that we take away some of the cultural baggage of sadness. Sadness is something people add onto loss. And instead we just enjoy it. How can we enjoy it when it's someone you've loved so much who's now passed away? I say that personally, because many of you know that my own father, died when I was only 16. And I love my father very, very much. He died at home. Only a small council flat. My mother woke me up in the middle of the night. I can't wake up your dad. So I went into the room. His body was cold. You shook him, but he wouldn't wake up. He was dead. As a 16-year-old, that's quite tough. But I never felt sad. Honestly, I never cried when my father passed away. I never cried at his funeral service. I never cried since my father's death, even though I loved him so much. It was because I loved him so much. But that was why I never cried. Do you understand? I'll give you the simile which I usually give. The simile was, as a young man, I grew up in London. I wasn't always a monk. Like every other young guy, you like going to concerts, seeing musicians. And I remember lucky being at that age in London, seeing all these amazing musicians. I don't know what you like in music, but it was so available. I like jazz. I remember seeing Miles Davis and Robbie Coltrane. Any jazz aficionados? I always went to see any rock aficionados. I went to see the very, very, very first concert of Led Zeppelin. I remember going to a pub in the north of London, and at the top story of that pub there was a small band playing. There's only 6 people turned up. I was one of those 6. And the leader of that eventually became very famous. Who was it? Mr. Rod Stewart. A private concert, me and 5 others. Now, when I mention those things, when you go to such amazing concerts, how do you feel afterwards when the concert finishes? I never cried after a great concert. I never felt sad. I felt, wow, how lucky I had been to have been there during this amazing performances. You know, get right close up to Rod Stewart, you know, to see just a few meters away, Led Zeppelin, Miles Davis or Robbie Coltrane, all these great musicians. When they'd finished, what did I say? More, encore. And sometimes they would play a few more songs for you. That's like my father. I remember he came very close to death many times, but managed to keep on going a little while longer. And when the final song was played, and I had to walk out of those great auditoriums, I never felt sad. I felt how lucky I'd been as a young man to have seen some of the greatest performers of my generation. I will never forget that. And that is precisely how I felt when my father died. What a wonderful performance that was. And how lucky I was to have been his son for 16 years. I would have rather had him for longer than that, but nevertheless, 16 years was amazing. and I never felt sad. I felt like crying. When the going got tough, I got kindful. Kindness, thank you. Grateful, not sad. Why did you leave me? It's not fair. I never felt like that. I felt thank you, a big thank you. And you can see that that actually takes away a lot of the sadness when the going gets tough. The kindfulness makes you aware of what's really happening. You see things in a totally different way. Many of you are 1 year older than when I saw you last year. We're all getting older. So, are you looking forward to your death? Are you? If you're wise, you know, the older you get, the tougher it gets. Even now, just when I was meditating and there, getting up, afterwards, oh, I'm 72 now. I'm an old monk. I know that sometimes, the last time I went back to my monastery from Hong Kong, I told the monks, I'm getting old now. They said, no, you're not. And I thought, how sweet that is. How kind. They told me I'm not getting old. I said, Ajahn, you're not getting old. We have to be honest. You are old. You've got there. So whatever it happens, it happens. But nevertheless, being kindful, you know what that word came from? I got that word in Hong Kong many years ago. I thought it was actually from the suggestion of dear Gerald, but it's actually, he said it was me. Yeah, I usually don't like to take responsibility for things. Usually pass the buck. But one thing I noticed, being mindful is great, but sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you miss too much. So kindful is adding this kindness onto whatever you're looking at, whatever you're seeing, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're knowing. And it kind of opens up the mind much deeper into reality. To understand what that means, I give a Buddhist simile now, the simile of the 1,000-petaled lotus. You all know lotus flowers. They close up at night time. And in the early morning, maybe it's not a good simile for Hong Kong because I haven't seen the sun ever since I came here. But, in summertime maybe. So when the sun comes out, the light and the warmth of the sun falls on the outermost sheath of the lotus flower and it starts to open up. Depends upon the light and the warmth of the sun to open. And once that outermost petal opens up, the light and the warmth of the sun can hit the next layer of petals, and that can open up. One by one, those lotus petals open up, as long as the light and the warmth of the sun can hit that outermost layer of petals. And one of the things I've always noticed, if you see a lotus flower which is closed up, its outermost sheath, I don't even call it a petal, is not fragrant, it's not beautiful. But as it does open up, the next layer of petals is still thick, a little bit of fragrance, but the more you go deep into the lotus, the more beautiful and fragrant and thin are the petals. To get to the really beautiful part of the lotus, you have to go right inside. And I thought, that's you, the human being. Your outermost sheath is your body, protects all that's inside. How do you actually, when you're meditating, go inside this body? That's what it feels like. Inside the 5 senses of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touch. How do you get inside of that? You're aware and kind. Mindfulness and kindness, make kindfulness. Warmth and light of the sun. The warmth is the kindness, the light is the mindfulness. As you go in, you find your five senses settle down, and you find your awareness goes inside to your mind, the sixth sense. That's what happens when I meditated, just meditating in the VIM room earlier. VIM, very important monk. And when I was in there, eventually your body and the five senses disappear. You go inside to your mind. Whenever any of you do that, what happens next? You get all these thoughts and ideas, all these things you're supposed to be doing, all these memories, these jobs, these duties. You've got to go inside of that. How do you do that? And the big wonderful thing about Buddhism, which defeats Eckhart Tolle, is that you're kind. If you want to let go of your past, be kind to it first. Don't just be mindful, be kindful. And you just quote someone like a Shakespeare. You know, all of life is like a play, and each one of you are actors on the stage of life. Understanding it like that, each one of you are actors. Why can't we add this kindness? Kindness to your own failures of life. Kindness to your successes of life. Kindness to all those other actors on the stage of your life who mistreated you, who abused you, who cheated you. Can you be kind to that? If you are kind to these things, they tend to disappear. That's how you let go of the past. Not by trying to get rid of it, by being kind to it. I'll tell you some of these amazing stories. I probably told this last year because this is one of those stories which inspire me every time I tell it. I've told it more times than you've ever heard it. It was a group over in Perth. They call themselves ASSETS, an acronym. It stands for the Australian Society of Survivors of Torture and Trauma. You know, there are people in this world who get very, very, very seriously hurt by some very treacherous regimes overseas. And for some reason or another, they manage to survive, seek for asylum, and come to a country like Australia. Physically, they're safe. But emotionally, they're still in those underground torture chambers, being, please excuse me, multiply raped, beaten, tortured. They have physical safety, but still emotionally bound by their past. And these group of psychologists, they said they got all of these tricks or therapies from coming to my center in Perth. And that really fascinated me, because I never realized how, even me don't realize how powerful some of these attitudes are. And the one which really served them was the opening the door of your heart simile. I think you all know that, at least I hope you do. Open the door of your heart is you imagine that my door is going to be open to whatever happens in this world. It's like an unconditional mindfulness. And so actually in this particular case, they decided to adapt it, to take it further than I'd ever expected. Some of these victims of torture and trauma, when they felt safe, confident, in this little place in the north of Perth, they were asked to sit down on a chair. They could stop at any time they liked, make themselves as peaceful as they possibly could, which was not that peaceful. And then to close their eyes and imagine in their heart region 2 doors, like the doors you came in to today, double door. Imagine that door opening. And inside is that part of you which you can tolerate, which you can be at peace with. Some of the happy moments of your life so far. But outside, make it like a cold concrete outside of you. There's that little girl who was brutally abused. That guy who was beaten for no reason. A reason they can never understand. People were tortured. And that's you. You imagine those people outside. And you imagine a little staircase coming down from those two doors above your heart. And you, that part of you which you're at peace with, which you can accept and tolerate, calling out to them, the door of my heart is open to every one of you. Come in. And encourage that little girl who was so badly abused. Come up. Imagine how traumatic that is. You have to really encourage them to come inside. But eventually they do. This big hug. I will never reject you ever again. You're kind to them. And that kindness to part of you in the past was so badly treated. That was amazingly effective. I remember just being with one of these women, and she was telling this young man, just in earshot of me, and she's telling what happened to her, and it was absolutely gross. I don't know how she survived. And then, sort of this guy said, that was terrible what happened to you. And she said, no, you've got no right to say that. That's who I am. I've dug that in. That's me. And she was so sincere. She was not suppressing it anymore, or hiding it, or being embarrassed about it, or thinking that was a bad part of herself. She'd accepted it and brought it in. And she was not suffering anymore. That was how that problem had been amazingly solved. Instead of rejecting it, was kind in embracing the past, opening the door of her heart to what had happened to her, and let it in. She was safe now. And that past would not keep coming up in her dreams or in her life. Instead, she'd do the other thing which I'd written about before, digging it in. You've heard me, I tell this story every year. If something really terrible happens to you in your life, you know, a tough thing, how do you deal with it? One of the best ways of dealing with it is like the simile, when you go home this evening, you found that somebody has dumped a whole truckload of stinky poo right in front of your front door. What are you going to do with it? You've got two choices. You put it in your pocket, in your bag, and carry it around with you. You find you lose a lot of friends. You know, even your friends, people who really care about you and love you, they can only take so much negativity. The other way of dealing with the poo of life, I was going to say the shit of life, but this talk is being recorded. Oops. The other way of dealing with it is getting out a wheelbarrow and a spade and digging it in a garden. If you haven't got a garden, in the public gardens, anywhere, dig it in. It's got immense fertilizing power. And if you're in a country like Australia, where many people have a backyard somewhere, wow, when you dig in the dung of your life, you'll find a year later, the flowers which you have in your garden are sweeter and more beautiful than any other flower in the whole city. And if you grow some fruit trees, that your fruits are more tasty than anything you can buy in a shop. You know where I got that simile from? In my 6 rains retreat, I was meditating in this cave in the north of Thailand. There had lots of bats in that cave. I never minded the bats because you go into nice meditation, you can't hear anything. But right outside that cave, there was the most beautiful papaya tree. And they received all this free fertilizer from the bats as the bats flew out. And they came back again, and that's where they did their pooing, right on that, that papaya tree. And honestly, that was the sweetest papaya I've ever tasted in my life. You can't get anything like that in the shops here or anywhere, because they had this free fertilizer, natural fertilizer from all these bats. And as a monk, I can't ask for anything. But what I did, I knew all the tricks, what I was allowed to do. So when I saw one of those papayas get ripe, I would tell the layperson, I'd say, oh, come over here for a moment. I can do that. Oh, look at that papaya there. It's almost ripe. That's what I could do hints. If I did that to some of you, say, oh, yeah, you're right, it is ripe. But they knew exactly what to do. So that was usually picked and presented to me the following morning. And honestly, I would eat the whole papaya. It was so delicious. And it came from the poo of the bats. So, for you, whatever difficulties and troubles you have in life, when the going gets tough, the tough get kind for. They're kind enough and mindful enough, wise enough to dig all that poo into your life. Grow flowers, papayas, or whatever other fruits you like in this world. Vegetables, if you like. And you find you get so many delicious, beautiful vegetables and fruits, more beautiful, delicious than you've ever seen before, all come from the poo of life. So that's how I look at my past. Whatever's happened, you bring it up, allow it to come in, and say thank you. When you're kind to the past, it becomes very, very soft, and you can let it go so easily. Why do people keep holding on to it and torturing yourself? And whoever else has done anything to me, being cruel, being mean, not understood, not taking the time to listen, thank you. You taught me so much. I've learned so much from all those terrible things you've done. What it means is you learn, you grow. And that's the same with the future. Even I've only been in Hong Kong for a day and a half, and people were even saying today, oh, they're afraid that, there may be a war of the South China Sea. There may be all sorts of terrible things happen. Are you worried about the past? Or the future, rather? I don't know how long I've been alive now, but I've seen people worrying about the future so many times. I remember when Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of UK, and I think Ronnie Reagan, he was the President of the United States, and they thought this means nuclear war. The two major powers at the time sort of being so close together. And many people were afraid there might break out to be a war. Was there a war? I remember when there was a war, the Second World War. There's so much destruction. I could still remember, I was born in 1951, after the Second World War, but I can still remember seeing many of the bomb sites, seeing many of my math teacher at the time. He was in a tank. He was blown up in Italy at that time. And he was such a scary man on the outside because he was blown up in the tank. And one of the things I was amazed at, the enemy, the Italians at the time, they managed to give him surgery. He had to turn around his face. He looked like a monster. And one of his fingers was off, so it just had a part of the bone sticking through. He was my maths teacher. I always wondered how he could actually count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He only have half a finger on one of his hands. Thank you for laughing. But he was so kind. He actually inspired me to be a mathematician. But nevertheless, all of those problems and traumas of war, people have actually dug them in. And they were amazing people, inspirations. And so why are you worried about war? Why are you worried about anything? It probably would never happen. If it does happen, you've got extra supplies of fertilizer to dig into your gardens, get more flowers and more beautiful fruit. That's how I look at the future. You say, Ajahn Brahm, you're crazy. I admit it, monks are crazy. But nevertheless, when you have attitudes like that, you don't worry about the past, you don't worry about the future. You can be in the present moment and be kind to the present moment. That's another thing. You can be mindful of what's happening now. You're really aware of what's happening now. Sometimes you can see me looking at you when I give a talk. I notice that sometimes some of you start falling asleep, and if you do, it's a time for a joke. That's why I tell jokes, to wake you up. And I tested this joke earlier on today. Can I tell the bear, the rabbit, and the magic duck joke? How many of you have heard that joke before, that story? The bear, the rabbit, and the magic duck. Not many of you. Oh, one over there. Here it comes again. I've heard it more times than you have. Every time I tell it. So once upon a time, once upon a time, there was this bear and this rabbit, and they would chase each other in the forest, making all sorts of noise. And one day they were chasing each other, and they passed this lake where a magic duck lived. And the duck said, look, we shouldn't chase each other making all this noise. The forest is nice and peaceful. Just stop chasing one another. And the bear said, I get bored. And the rabbit said, yes, one way of getting exercise. I don't mind. He said, look, both of you, if you promise not to chase each other again, I will give you 3 wishes. 3 each. And Mr. Bear looked at Mr. Rabbit. Mr. Rabbit looked at Mr. Bear, and they agreed. So, Mr. Bear, tell me your first wish. And Mr. Bear said, I wish, I'm a male bear, I wish that all the other bears in this forest are all female. I'm the only male bear. You know what many males are like, don't you? And so, okay, quack. And all the bears in the whole forest were all female. He was the only male bear. And then he looked at Mr. Rabbit. What's your first wish? And Mr. Rabbit said, my first wish is a motorbike helmet with 2 holes in the back for my long ears. What do you want a motorbike helmet for? Is that your first wish? Look, said Mr. Rabbit, you gave me a wish. You shouldn't question what it is. If I want a motorbike helmet, you should give me one. Okay, fair enough. Quack. And then a motorbike helmet appeared on the head of the rabbit. Okay, Mr. Bear, what's your second wish? And Mr. Bear said for his second wish, my second wish, I would wish for all the bears in this whole land, this whole country, all being female. Because once they hear there's only female bears in this forest, they'll all come over here and spoil my fun. May all the bears in this whole country all be female, and I'm the only male bear. Crazy, but okay, quack. And he got his wish. And then, Mr. Rabbit, what's your second wish? And Mr. Rabbit said, my second wish is the 1000cc Harley Davidson to go with my motorbike helmet. I can understand that, said the duck, so quack. And this rabbit was sitting on top of a Harley Davidson, turning on, revving it up, ready to go. Okay, Mr. Bear, what's your last and final wish? And Mr. Bear said, my last wish is that all the bears in the whole world are female. Because you know what's going to happen? Once they hear there's only female bears here, they will migrate. You know the problem with migration all over the world. So, okay, quack. And so all the bears in the whole world were all female. He was the only male bear in the whole world. He was very happy for a moment. And Mr. Rabbit, what's your last wish? And Mr. Rabbit was on his motorbike revving up for a quick getaway. He said, my last wish is that Mr. Bear is gay. Vroom, vroom, vroom. He had to make a fast getaway. Nothing against gays. It's much against men who just have these stupid wishes. Okay. So actually, I've already gone over 3 minutes. Let's have some questions. Let's have to be mindful, okay? Just learn how to be kind to the present moment, the past and the future. And then you find you can stay in the present moment. And once you're in this present moment, you can understand what's really happening in life. And it's not half as bad as you think, except if you Mr. Bear.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, that's not the way we do sadhus after one of my talks. Even the Buddha said, just give, whatever you do, give it effort, give it energy. And Ajahn Brahm, Ajahn Chah used to teach me the same. Whatever you do, give it everything you've got. Sadhu. 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 How does that make you feel? Give it energy. And anyone who's asleep, it wakes them up.
All right, we have ushers to my left and to my right. And when you raise your hand, I will choose the lucky person. And then the usher will present you with a microphone for your question, not questions, one at a time. In the center? Thank you.
Yep, okay. If anybody wants to be fit, there should be an usher running up and down the stairs.
Hi, Ajahn Brahm. Thank you for your very entertaining and wise talk. I know that you have written quite extensively on kindfulness, but for the practical purpose of this talk, if you were to give us the core essence of kindfulness, what would you say? And could you give us some practical illustrations, especially for Hong Kong people? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The main aspect of kindfulness is learning how to open the door of your heart. And to really be able to open it, it has to be wide, which is to take away a lot of the judgments which we have. That closes your door off against many other people and even against yourself. A good example we were talking about earlier is people, this was a lunchtime today, addiction. There was one gentleman in Singapore who was addicted to alcohol. And then first of all, I suggested, why don't you do a video of yourself or get someone to video you when you're drunk? Just see it for yourself. And then say, how you behave is terrible. You'd be so ashamed, you would never want to be drunk again. And he corrected me. I thanked him for this. He said, if I did that, the main reason why I get drunk will be enhanced. The reason I get drunk, why people get addicted to things like drugs or any bad behavior, they never think they're good enough. They don't know how to accept and love themselves. Instead of that, the old simile which I gave was of the crooked and bent tree in the forest. I remember giving this simile once. to people who were clients of the mental health service over in Australia. And they ended up crying their eyes out. It really hit them. One of the reasons they always think because of something they've been told by a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a doctor, they're not good enough, there's something wrong with them. They're damaged goods. And I told them I've lived in the forest all my life. Not in Hong Kong. I live in a hotel when I'm here. But nevertheless, all the trees I've ever seen in the forest, always bent, crooked, damaged. Look on their trunk. There's always some damage on there. So I said to these clients of the mental health service, if any of you think that you are damaged goods, bent, crooked, with things torn off you, like the branches of the trees in the forest, please always remember you belong in this beautiful forest we call humanity. You don't try and be a perfect tree. If you try to be a perfect tree, all those holes left in your trunk where branches have been torn off, that's the habitat in Australia for little possums or for birds. It's essential. And all that twisted bentness of the trees, the more bent and twisted and damaged they are, they're my favorites. Professional photographer, those are the ones you like to photograph more than anything else. They're the favorite ones. So it's taking the idea of imperfections, the way we look at imperfections in life, and turning them into something totally different. Beauty. When all these people, for years, they have been thought there was something wrong with them. I told them, there's nothing wrong with you. You're different. You're more bent than many other people. You're my favorite trees. And I meant that honestly. That's one of the reasons why that kindfulness in real life, kindful to yourself, kindfulness when you've made a mistake or someone's hurt you, like those people in assets. It's amazing. I don't want that ever to happen to anybody or happen to me. But I learned and grew so much from that. Thank you for that lesson. You don't have negativity, you have like gratitude. Thank you, Father, for being 16 years as my dad. I would love to have more, but thank you so much for that. Those are lessons on how to be mindful. It changes life. Changes the way we look at life. Sometimes people say, I'm going to just go a little bit further on this. Sometimes people say, but, if we don't do anything to solve the world will be getting worse and worse and worse. And what happens is so much suffering there. As a Buddhist monk, I look at it in a different way. I look at it that this is like a school, this world, this like a university class. I imagine like an alien from some planet a long way away landing at one of your schools here in Hong Kong. And they go into, say, the year 8 or whatever it is. And they look at year 8. Every 10 years they go into year 8. And they find, wow, these stupid kids in Hong Kong that are teaching exactly the same subjects in year 8 as they taught 10 years ago. There's no progress. They don't realize that the kids which they looked at 10 years ago have now grown up and graduated. They passed through these lessons. They've learned from them. And now they're learning something again, something higher, something deeper. Just like this world, all the human beings on it. I always understand that we're all reincarnated, rebirth from life to life. We learn so much each time. If you don't learn, you have to come back again, do the class again, or go into detention. But nevertheless, don't think, oh, this world just gets worse and worse, or just stays the same. It's like all of these experiences is where we learn. And when we do learn, we don't have to come back to these experiences. These experiences are still here, but we don't have to be in a world like this, in better worlds, where we can learn deeper things. Because I know for suffering, many people say, it's got no meaning. Why does this happen? Why is this my son? Why does he cheat me or lie to me? What's the meaning of that? The meaning of that is so we have a more difficult test, so we can learn the power of such things as compassion and kindness and forgiveness. Finding meaning is so important. Does that make sense to you? Okay, thank you.
All right, next question. Any hands? Oh, right, Della.
Hi, Ajahn. My very good friend is here today. She's going to get married soon. So can you give her some or ask some advice about when you're married, lives get tough, how you be kind with each other?
When you're married, life gets tough. When you don't get married, life gets tough. When you become a monk or a nun, though, life is easy. No, please, some of these stories I think you know, but nevertheless, they make a lot of sense. This one was from my own teacher, Ajahn started the quack quack story. If you haven't heard it before, I don't know what you've been doing. There was husband and wife, they'd just been married. They were walking through a forest one day after lunch, and they heard a sound. Quack, 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 quack. And the wife said, "Oh, darling, can you hear that? That's a chicken." He paused. "A chicken? Yes, it's a chicken." "No, it's not. It's a duck. Ducks go quack, quack, not chickens." He said, "No, no, 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 no. I'm sure that's a chicken," said the wife. "It can't be. It's a duck. D-U-C-K, duck." It is important when you give talks, even in universities, to give it some oomph. Duck, D-U-C-K, duck. It wakes people up, makes it interesting. And he looked into her eyes, and they were getting watery. She was about to cry. So he remembered why he married her. He said to her, "Darling, I think you may be right. That is a chicken." And it went quack, quack again. And she squeezed his hand gently and said, "Thank you, darling." And that night he had a hot dinner. That was a very smart man. Honestly, who cares whether it's a chicken or a duck? Is that important in life? But what's really important in our world is like respecting one another, loving one another, caring about one another. He realized being in love was more important than being right. And anyway, are you sure you're right? I mentioned this, I think, yesterday or today somewhere. Ajahn Chah's been telling that story for such a long time. He's dead now, so he's probably telling it in some heaven world, or his enlightened world, I don't know. But anyway, he gets other people to tell it for him. And in those years that people have gone on the internet, and they have found out, yes, there is at least one chicken who goes quack, quack. That poor little chicken, when it was young, was actually adopted by a family of ducks. It was an orphan. And it does actually go quack, quack. That's not a joke. That's actually serious. You think you must be right because only ducks go quack, quack. But this one actually just did go quack, quack, a chicken. So never think you have to be right. Even if your husband said, "Oh, listen to that, darling, that's a cow going quack, quack." Say, "Yes, darling." It's not important to argue over silly things. That's the first one for a marriage. Even, I think I told this story, if you have to make decisions, why do people who are supposed to be in love argue so much? So I decided to do what we call the calendar method when you're getting married. And the calendar method works like this. If you have a disagreement, you have to settle who's right and who's wrong. Look at the calendar. What day of the month is it? What day is it today? No, what day of the month, not day of the week. 12th, the 13th, 14th? 3rd, okay. I should actually stop living in the moment and actually find out what the day of the week it is or day of the month. And for many years, being a monk, you forgot about dates and time. I never wanted to be a prisoner of dates and time. But then, first time I went to Australia after being a monk in the forest of Thailand for so many years, one of the people who was visiting had an epileptic fit. So we had to call an ambulance. And one of the first things the ambulance officer, the medics did was ask him what day it was today. He didn't know. He just had an epileptic fit. So that was proof to them that he needed hospital attention. I was just glad they never asked me. They put me in the ambulance as well. So that time on, I tried to remember what day it was. But anyway, sort of, if it's an even day of the month, 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th, the man is always right. If it's the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, then the woman is always right. It's fair. Why does it always have to be the man who's always right or the wife who's always right? Can't we have some fairness in life? And anyway, women, remember, there's more odd days in the month than there are even days, so you're ahead. It stops all arguments. The only trouble was that when in Australia, it didn't work for same-sex marriages. I didn't know what to do there. And the other story with a marriage, and this is the serious one, is that because sometimes you have to do marriage blessings for people. And it's a privilege. Sometimes I wonder, why do you want a monk to do the blessing when someone's got married? I have been celibate for almost 50 years now. What do I know about marriages? I've never been married. But nevertheless, even though you don't know anything about it, you've always got an opinion. You ask any other expert. So anyway, that I usually, at a ceremony, I look into the bride's eyes, first of all. Look into her eyes and said, "You are now a married woman. From this day on, you must never think of yourself." She always understands straight away and smiles sweetly. And I turn to the husband. "You now are a married man. You must never think of yourself from this time on." I'm being honest now. This is only anecdotal, my own experience. The husband always pauses. But eventually he says, "Yes, okay, fair enough." And then still looking at the husband, saying, "From this moment on, this day on, you must never think of your wife." You've all gone silent. That shows this anecdote is working on you. And I look at the wife and say, "From this moment on, you must never think of your husband." And it's a wonderful moment of confusion. I've got you all paying attention now. What was the answer? And the answer, from this moment on, you must never think of your partner. You must never think of yourself. In a marriage, you must only think of us. Mm-hmm. It's a third option which people keep on missing out on. You're in this together. They say in a country like sort of China, Hong Kong, that over here you were a two-legged animal before. You can go wherever you want. Now you're a four-legged animal. You have to go together. But once you're a four-legged animal, who's the front legs? Who's the back legs? Please excuse me, but this is Asian culture here. The front legs have to be the male. The back legs have to be the female. But don't worry, in Asia, most elephants walk backwards. It's true. So that's my marriage simile. They also say that marriage is like a pack of playing cards. You know why? You start with two hearts, and then you move on to a diamond. And after a few years, you get to the clubs and the spades. That's a very negative joke. I apologize. I don't know why people don't do marriage right. And a lot of times that you have to have a lot of understanding and forgiving to be happily married. But you can do that. Your husband, somebody came and told me this. What was this story? This young man, he wanted to get married. So, to make himself more attractive, he did go to a really good university like Hong Kong University. He got a really good degree. And he also started a little business, made a lot of money, made sure he was very well dressed, looked handsome. And then he went looking for the most beautiful woman in the world to marry. He was wealthy, good looking, and well educated. So let's get the most wonderful woman in the world. So first of all, he went over to New York. And there he found a very, very beautiful woman who was a model. So he invited her out, and at dinner found out she was so uneducated. She didn't know much about anything except looking pretty. So I can't marry her. So then he went over to London, and there he found another woman who was even more beautiful than the model, who had 3 PhDs. So he had dinner with her, but found out she couldn't cook. And he liked his food, so he dumped her. And then at last, he came to Hong Kong. And there he saw the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. And she had 4 PhDs. She was so incredibly intelligent. And she owned 3 restaurants. She owned those restaurants. She was a Michelin 5-star chef. She was the perfect woman for her. So he proposed to her. And she said no, because she was looking for the perfect man. You don't find a perfect guy because you're not a perfect girl. You're good enough. I remember doing some marriage counseling once, and this woman, she was telling me all the faults about her husband. And there's a lot of them. Then I asked her husband, and he was telling me all the faults in his wife. A lot of those too. And said, you've both got so many faults, both of you. You just told me, and they agreed, yes. So you're a perfect match. Why do we always get divorced? Because the faults of another. You should think about yourself. Be very very grateful that somebody can actually commit to you. Thank you for that. And you grow together. And the next thing about marriage is This is not part of the talk, is it? No, marriage. Anyway.
Well,
Anyhow.
you have to be kind in marriage.
Yeah, you do, yes. You had to be very kind and mindful as well. No, the last part of it is always part of kindfulness. One of the reasons to be kind is to be able to have forgiveness. And many years ago, when I was in Malaysia, in Malacca, I just happened to be there doing a weekend retreat. And there was somebody who used to follow me on the internet, was getting married there. Just the same weekend I was giving a retreat. She couldn't believe her luck. Ajahn Brahm, can you please come and do the marriage blessing for me? And she was like a TV personality. She was quite famous in Malaysia. Sandria I think her name was. And anyway, so I agreed. And because she was a celebrity, it was the first time I got my photo in Vogue magazine. I made the glossy pages. Just a thing to say. But nevertheless, but afterwards, she came to do an MC for me at one of the big talks I gave in Malaysia. And she said, the best thing I taught her at her marriage ceremony was every year on your anniversary, your wedding anniversary, please do a forgiveness ceremony together. Just the two of you, whether it's, in the evening if you possibly can, a quiet dinner together, or maybe in the lunchtime or something, but please do it. Sit in front of one another and give each other a little gift, just a little thing. It can just be like a flower or something. And then tell your partner, doesn't matter who does it first, take turns, and tell your partner with sincerity, if there's anything which I have done in the past 12 months, by body, by speech, or even thoughts, by mind, which I shouldn't have done, which has upset you, or things I didn't do which I should have done, I forgot about, which has upset you, please I ask your forgiveness. I'm not a perfect human being, but I love you, I care for you, please forgive me. And if you're asked for forgiveness with such sincerity, you always have to give it. And then it's the other partner's time. Whatever I've done by body, speech, or mind the last year, or things I didn't do which I should have done, please forgive me. I'm not perfect, but I love you too. We want to grow together. And she said that was the best thing which she'd ever learned. And that's why her marriage was so successful. So she said, thank you so much for that. That was the key to actually being together, realizing they were both imperfect, but we were willing to accept that and to ask, to say, like, I'm sorry if I hurt you, please let me know so I can do better next time. Simple things, but please do that. Please tell your friends. Forgiveness ceremony. She's here. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Another question? Over there, yeah.
In the front?
Yes.
Thank you, Ajahn. I really appreciate your talk and teaching. My question is about grieving.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so, and I know that I've also have a friend here as well. So I myself is grieving for the loss of a loved one. My case is a cat, but it's an emotional support cat for me. I also know that my friend, and so having, close family member that passed away. And so, grieving is tough, even though that you have this gratefulness. And that even though that, like in my case, because I can see that the last period of moment, it was really, really suffering for my cat. So I'm grateful that he's gone. He's no longer suffering. But then there are always like this moment where you feel like, oh, I really want to be able to hold him again. So I like to hear tips for grieving in general. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, grief is actually something you do see even in animals as well. I remember parrots, they mate for life. They only have one partner, and the parrots live a long life. So I remember this, our gardener at our monastery once told me when they came to work, they saw a dead parrot by the side of the road and been squashed by a car. And they also saw a parrot in a branch of a tree close by, just staring at this deceased parrot. He worked all day. In the evening when he went home, he saw that parrot hadn't moved from the tree, still staring at the deceased parrot. When he went to work the next morning, he saw the same scene. One parrot dead on the ground, one parrot staring at it. It lasted for 3 days. Even like animals can experience grief. But sometimes you can actually see that grief goes on way too long. And the nicest thing is, look, I know I'm going to die one day. You always say, Ajahn Brahm, please don't die. But of course I'm going to die one day. Can I ask you, my close friends and people who invite me over here, people I've known for such a long time, please don't grieve for me if I die. Will you do that? No, you won't. It'd be wonderful if you can. It just adds suffering into life. Not even the cats would like that. You know, I mentioned earlier about one of my best friends, Bernard Carr, being into ghost hunting. Have you ever seen a ghost cat or a ghost dog? Sometimes, if we were more open, that cat who passed away, when you're in bed at night, can actually crawl over you. And you feel it. It is that cat. You know, once there was this lady I think her partner had died, and all she had in her life was her dog, who she loved like a human being. And every morning and afternoon, twice a day, they'll go for a walk together in the forest, exercise, just being alone together. And then one day while they were playing in the forest, that she lost her finger ring. And the finger ring was not expensive, it's not valuable, but emotionally had, enormous value to her, just emotionally. And then a few days, she went looking for it, but in a forest, it's so hard to find a little thing like a ring. But then the dog got sick, so she forgot about trying to find her ring, and the dog died. And she told me after the dog had died and was buried, she could always hear the dog's voice in her house, the dog's bark. You know the way even your cat sounds. You know them, you get used to them. In the way it smells. And this was her dog. I had no doubts at all. But it was always in a room where she wasn't in. So she'd immediately rush to that room, open the door, but there was no sign of the dog. She said that was so frustrating. She could hear it, but she couldn't see it. Until one day, she was by the front door of her own house and heard her dog barking outside. Remember, it was dead by now. Heard it barking and opened the door so quickly, there's no way the dog could run away, the ghost dog could run away. But there was no dog in front of the door. But right in front of the door was her finger ring. The dog had found her ring for her, and that was the last she heard of the dog's barking. The dog had done one more act of kindness for the person the dog also loved. I kind of find that beautiful. They do such things. Not even ghost dogs. It's nice when that happens. Sometimes you'd love to Just wake up in the morning and feel the soft fur of the little cat just rubbing against your cheek? Would you? Or you'd be afraid?
I wouldn't be afraid, but if reincarnation do happen, I wouldn't want him to stuck around. I
They
would
don't
want him to
stick
go.
around.
They don't.
It's just for usually 49 days. They come and visit you. And just, how would your dog feel? They just feel that so sad. I just want to be with you a little while longer, or just to say goodbye in a nice way. And that's happened so many times. This other guy, he was a builder, and his dog had to take him to the vet to be, euthanized. And he felt so guilty about that. But the dog used to go to work with him every day. This was in Australia. Would jump in the back of the ute. And so the dog died. And so the next morning, he got up to go to work. When he opened the front door of his house, this dog ran in. It looked just like his dog, but it couldn't be him because his dog had died. And just the day before. But this dog ran into the house and went into all of the corners of the rooms where he'd always curl up and take a sleep, all his favorite places, went out onto the veranda where there was always a leaky tap, still leaking, where he'd get a drink of water, and then went up the stairs. His wife, builders have to start very early in the morning, and his wife was still in bed, half asleep. But the dog would always run up the stairs to give a kiss, to the builder's wife. And the woman was so half asleep she didn't realize she was kissing a ghost dog. And then the dog ran outside, down the stairs, and out with the builder, and wanted to jump in the back of the ute to go to work one more time, with the builder. But the builder realized what was happening and said, "No, go. You can't get in the ute." So the dog ran down the road, never seen again. The dogs, I'm telling you stories, I don't make these up, they're too weird to make up. True story as it was told to me. And this man even took a photograph of the dog, the ghost dog. One more time came to visit. A lot of times we don't allow that to happen. We're afraid, or we think, I don't want him to stay as a ghost or spirit. If it ever happens again, invite the cat, please come and visit one more time to make sure you're okay. So many times that actually happens. And I'll tell one other story. Who's my second monk right now? The other one is, I think it's been to Hong Kong, Ajahn Brahmali. Such a close resemblance, Ajahn Brahm, Ajahn Brahmali. This is a story one of my monks who came from the Punjab told. Not lying. When he was, everybody in the Punjab, if they are female, they're called Kaur, and if they are male, they're called Singh, Mr. Singh, and this one was Mr. Kaur, Mrs. Kaur. So one day this old woman died, surnamed Kaur, and in the morning, the doctors checked her up, she was dead, so they had to arrange a funeral that day. That was their custom, a cremation. So I got all the wood together and made the pie, invited all her close relations to come immediately. They were going to do the ceremony that evening. But before they could put her actually on the pie and light the wood, she came to. They couldn't believe it. This was a person who was confirmed dead by proper doctors. But then she was conscious again. And then she told what had happened. This is the way that she perceived it. The one she had died, she left her body, and there was these two junior spirits took her to this big hall, And then as soon as they took her to this big hall, this big spirit guy started scolding the junior spirits. You've got the wrong Mrs. Kaur. Take her back. This is not a joke. This actually happened. This is how she described her experience once she had left her body, once she was confirmed dead. And then they came back, and then she woke up, and then a few minutes later, another Mrs. Kaur died. This one never came to again. They got the right one this time. So if Ajahn Brahm dies, please make sure, wait for a while. They may have got the wrong Brahm, and they meant Brahmali.
That is being recorded in case he watches this.
Yeah, no. He's got a good sense of humor. Yeah, one of the things which I knew from Thailand, Thai culture, you can say all sorts of things about a person. People never take it to be offensive. They'd always actually laugh. And just you didn't have the same sense of ego which people have, especially in Western countries. And look at me. Am I fat? Some are saying yes, some are saying no. The polite ones are saying no. The honest ones are saying yes. Actually, it's not fat. You know, once I was going through customs over in New York. This is a real story. It is funny, though. Going through the customs and immigration. And this was many years ago. And they looked at me in a robe and said, "No, who are you? What are you doing?" Because many times, you know, they can be quite sort of judgmental. And it's anyone in a robe we have to check out. I thought I was a Muslim in a robe. And they said, "What's under your robe?" "Is it a suicide belt?" And I said, "No, it's only fat." And he said the same thing. Fat is a suicide belt. I'd laugh my head off. I'm not offended. But anyway, it's not fat. I've been a monk now over 49 years. Every year you're a monk, you grow in kindness. That's what you practice, loving kindness, kindfulness. And so my heart gets bigger every year. Soon it got so big, my heart, it was pressing against my rib cage. And it couldn't do anything else. It went down and out. So this is not fat. This is a big heart. Okay, that was a joke. Any other question or complaint? Okay.
In the center there, yes.
Yeah.
Wait until you have the microphone, please.
First of all, thank you for the talk. My first time here, and my first time to get to know to Ajahn Brahm, and to hear from you the messages. And if I sum them up, you are talking about we should appreciate what we have received, and forget, and to forgive.
Yeah.
But will you give some further definition on kindful or kindfulness, and especially how to extend onto other people from one's heart? I mean, I think we're talking a lot about control on oneself to get content of what you have or what you have been given. But there are different character and nature of people. Maybe some people are born with a lot of romance or jealousy or eagerness or I don't know. But how we can, I mean, when we learn to control myself to be kindful and to think rebelliously to from the other way around. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't really organize my questions, so I'm trying to spell out what I'm trying to say. So how can we extend this kindness
Okay.
onto people around us?
Yes.
And when the world is getting more tough and more tough, especially for we senior people, when we are getting aged, and how we get hand in hand to get through all these changes in the
Yeah.
world, which is not our habits or the way we used to live. I hope I make myself clear. Is that okay?
I think so. There's many questions there, but I'm going to start off with the first part of your question. I'm saying this because apparently this is a story I haven't actually told here before. I told this, I think, to Freddie today, and he said he hadn't heard this before. This is my preceptor. My preceptor wasn't Ajahn Chah. You know, I was sent, first of all, to Wat Saket in Bangkok, where, you know, to ordain, and that was under the monk eventually called Somdet Buddhajan. And I asked the people who sent me, why didn't you send me to Ajahn Chah straight away? You know what they said? They said, you were too happy. We didn't think you were serious. And of course, I've been a monk for such a long time now. I was serious. They always thought the only people who should go to temples are miserable ones. And that wasn't me. But anyway, this monk, who was a great scholar, remember Somdet Buddhajan? He was the head of Chulalongkorn University, and a really good scholar. But part of his training, he was born in the island of Koh Samui. It's now a tourist haven. But in those days, it was a very simple island in the south of Thailand. And he also had to learn meditation. That was part of the training for everybody. And so he told me this personal story. One day his teacher told him to meditate in the coconut tree grove. So he sat down under a tree, and he must have got into a very deep meditation, because after a couple of hours, when he came out and opened his eyes, you know, cross-legged on the ground, he saw this snake coiled up in his lap. And he recognized the snake straight away, a very venomous snake. The sort of snake he was told by his teachers and parents, you know, be very careful of. One bite and you're dead. And he saw that caught up in his own lap as he opened his eyes after a nice meditation. But he said the weirdest thing, the strangest thing, he wasn't afraid. Not afraid at all. But his beautiful sense of kindness, a natural sense of kindness, this very dangerous snake curled up in his lap. He wasn't sort of holding his body still. It was just easy, natural to be still. And he thought that, you know, in the old days, he said if he had moved, that snake would probably bite him. But he didn't even feel like moving. He wasn't afraid at all. He felt this lovely compassion for the snake. You know, I hope you're enjoying yourself on this soft lap. You can sit on here as long as you like, out of kindness, real kindness. And the snake stayed on his lap for another 20 minutes. And eventually, the snake decided to crawl away, and did crawl away. And this monk, you know, who's a great scholar, said that was the first time he realized just how, when you have a good meditation experience, even fear disappears. You see other very dangerous threats to you in a totally different way. And even people can't harm you. I've known that myself so many times. Many years ago, I almost got beaten up by a man who was delivering some tents and chairs for a big ceremony we were holding. We'd invited the local governor of Western Australia to come and open our new hall in Perth. I was responsible for arranging the chairs, the tents, and the tables. When they were actually arrived, I was busy doing something else. They all unloaded them, and I looked at the tents. They were filthy. We could, you know, hose them down. That wasn't a problem. And the chairs were also filthy. We had about 10 VIP chairs for the governor, an ambassador, and a few senior monks who were coming, VIMs. And we had the governor of Western Australia. It was amazing. He would come in the first place, Sir Gordon Reid. And I looked at the VIP chairs. Not one of those 10 chairs had the legs the same length. They all wobbled. I mean, seriously wobbled. I thought, I'd ask this hire firm, please get us the very best. We've got the governor coming tomorrow. Please. And I managed to get to the telephone on a Friday afternoon and call that hire company and get through to the boss. Remember what I said? We needed the best. Look, you've got 10 chairs, which are just no one can sit on. It's the biggest occasion for us. He said, oh, I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. We'll get them changed immediately. And this is Australia, not Hong Kong. By that time, I never realized that all the workers had finished for the week. They were in the office, which to them meant the pub, starting their weekly drinking. And so the boss went into the pub, say, guys, the Buddhists need their chairs changed. Imagine how they felt, having to go back to work. They were very upset, having to do an extra couple of hours work when they'd already knocked off work for the weekend. So they came, and I remember this time I was waiting for them. They turned the corner onto the road leading to our city centre. The car had only got halfway down the road, still travelling maybe 30 kilometres an hour. One of the guys jumped out of the truck, of the lorry, and came running towards me, his fist up. Where's the bloke in charge? I want to see the bloke in charge. I'm not used to an angry voice, so I'm doing the best I possibly can. It's much louder than that. So I said, I'm the bloke in charge. And he came right up to me. His eyes were like red, like you read in the sutras, like a yaka, a demon. And just he had his face so close to mine, I could smell the alcohol on his breath. I think that's the most alcohol I'd ever taken in since I ordained as a monk. Where's the bloke in charge? And he was really, really so angry, about to punch my face. And all of the helpers, just like each one of you, were just looking. Thank you, friends. There weren't any help at all. They were just looking to see what happened next. Have you ever had that experience? I remember falling off a roof, almost falling off a roof, just holding onto the gutter, and the ladder was almost falling away. Help! Instead of helping, everybody froze. But fortunately, somebody had some mindfulness and kindfulness, and they came and held the ladder so I could get down before I broke any bones. But anyway, on this occasion, right in front of me. But because I was a good meditator, I was so peaceful. I wasn't scared at all. But not just scared, not arrogant either. Because arrogance would get you punched. Instead, I never spoke to him. I never said, who are you? Yeah, but who are you? You and whose army is going to punch my lights out? I've got all these people behind me. You never went through what I call the foreplay of violence. Have you ever been mindful enough to see that? You can't just get angry and be violent against each other. You have to build it up and build it up, a lot of times through threats. But I wasn't into that. I just looked at him kindly, peacefully. And it got so clear to me, I had him in total my control. He couldn't even move. He couldn't carry on with a punch. He couldn't walk away. He was just stuck there, not knowing what to do next. I didn't play the usual rules of the game of violence. And in those about 5 minutes, the truck had parked and the boss came out and came to both of us. He was just still standing in front of me with his fist like this. I'm not exaggerating. It was really close to my nose. And he put his hand on this guy's shoulder and said, let's unload the truck. I said, yes, I'll help. And that was it. There's a feeling there which I had. There's no way that he could do any violence to me. Because of your state of mind, you were invulnerable. So if you learn meditation, you find no one can ever harm you. And I mean that. It's not an exaggeration. And that way, all those people who have hurt you in the past, thank you for teaching me that giving violence for violence, giving arrogance for violence doesn't work. But giving legitimate kindfulness, people can't hurt you. Not animals, not snakes, not even tigers. There's this one monk years ago in Thailand, Ajahn Chah used to describe him. If he met a tiger in the forest, this monk, he would kick the tiger, get out of the way. The tiger couldn't harm him. He was kind, but a bit sort of fierce. I never kicked a tiger in the backside. I met tigers. I remember meeting this tiger once. It was about maybe halfway between the monk in the front here and me. And the weirdest thing when you meet a tiger, I never had any fear. Not afraid at all. You know why? Because the tiger was in a zoo in a cage. Okay. Thank you for letting me entertain you. I don't know if I answered that question totally, but the answer really is, please do some meditation. It's not that hard.
Thank you, Ajahn Brahm. Time is up. As I said, I will bring this talk to an end at 5:30 sharp, and it is now 5:30. Therefore, please join me in thanking Ajahn Brahm for his wonderful talk. And on behalf of Ajahn Brahm, Bodhinyana, and CBSAA, as you are leaving the venue and going home, please do so with the blessings of the Triple Gems. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for coming. And thank you for our great MC.
I'm available whenever you are.
Excellent. Okay. I know I'm supposed to disappear straight away, but I won't.